Welcome once again to the 11th Annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. It is being presented by Northeastern State University and runs through Friday, February 14th. Most of you know I'm Bob Hales. I'll be your moderator for this session. And as a reminder, all of our sessions are closed captioned. To view the captions, simply click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. We have Michelle doing a great job with the captions. Today's session, as you see, is integrating synchronous technologies within the asynchronous course. And Bill Knapp is the Executive Director, Distance Learning and Instructional Technologies at Grand Rapids Community College. So, Bill, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. I think it's, kind of ironic that we're using Zoom. That actually, I'll be talking about a pilot that we had at GRCC using Zoom a couple of semesters ago, and I'll be sharing some of the results that we had from the pilot and some of the input that we received, feedback we received from our faculty and our students. This afternoon, I'll be sharing with you some of the research and theory that supports the integration of synchronous technologies within the online course, and how this integration can help to increase student engagement and instructor immediacy, and ultimately student success. In addition to looking at the theory and research, I will share with you some details about the pilot project and examples of what our faculty have been doing and what the students have to say about that. So when we talk about distance learning, the U.S. Department of Education defines distance learning as, quote, any mode of instruction in which there is a separation in time and place between the instructor and the student. And so it is this separation, this distance, that is actually the main draw for online learning. It's the asynchronous nature of the online learning environment that offers advantages for students who need a degree of flexibility. Students who may be physically at a distance from the campus, they may be working full time or maybe third shift, or even have irregular work schedules. There can be single parents, parents of young children, or maybe have someone elderly in their family, people with mobility challenges, et cetera, et cetera. In any case, distance learning is essential for some if they're going to continue their educational goals. So as we look at that separation between student and instructor, it is important for us to recognize that this can result in new to online learners experiencing a sense of isolation. And we hear about this from students oftentimes that say, why did you not continue your online course? And oftentimes students kind of explain this, maybe using different terms, but they talk about this sense of isolation. And it is responsible for a higher attrition rate, I think, in the online course compared to on-campus instruction. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some theory behind that and how we might address that. So Michael Moore's transactional distance theory suggests that this physical separation between the student and instructor also has the potential of creating a psychological or an emotional distance as well, this transactional distance. And that transactional distance may be mitigated by the degree of structure and interactivity built into the course or integrated into the course. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The graphic that I'm sharing illustrates this principle, that the more autonomous a learner, on the right side of the graphic, the less structure and dialogue that may be required on the left side. So as a student is, in fact, sometimes the more autonomous the learner, the less structure and dialogue is even desired by the learner. Learners who possess a strong sense of autonomy and self-efficacy are more likely to be successful in the asynchronous online course. But that is probably true in any environment. Autonomous learners tend to possess strong time management, organizational skills. They also tend to have a successful past experience in task completion and in completing tasks on time. So those are the kind of the characteristics that the autonomous or self-directed learner possesses that kind of gives them the advantage in the online course. So it's important, I think, to recognize that inversely, the learner that lacks these autonomous or self-directed characteristics may benefit from an increase in structure and dialogue or interactivity within the distance learning environment. I work at a community college, and many of our students at the community college are first-generation college students. So they may lack the experience or support network necessary to navigate and to persist in college. So these students may require more guidance, more structure, in order to compensate for that lack of experience, that lack of confidence or self-efficacy. So when I look at this, whether it's up or down, it really isn't one or the other. Moore's transactional distance theory, I propose, is more of a continuum, not simply a case of whether you possess or don't possess this autonomy. And parallel to this continuum is one of time and place. So one that represents the level of flexibility in the learning environment. We can talk a little bit about modality when we look at that. And with the most structured and interactive learning environment, that tends to be in the here and now. And whereas the most flexible or autonomous is at any time or at any place. So to give you kind of an example of how that might work, we look at, this is as far as a level of flexibility. Learners requiring the highest degree of structured interaction may benefit most within the traditional face-to-face classroom environment. And so as we progress along the spectrum, we have varying degrees of flexibility until we reach the other end of the continuum, where we have the self-directed, self-paced learner who may thrive in such learning environments as competency-based education, where there is kind of self-paced, but yet there's still some coaching, and then, or even in MOOCs, where they may, enroll in a Coursera, whether they get credit or not, or Khan Academy, lynda.com, on the far end. A lot of these students are the same students that would come into your classroom, and really, if you just handed them the textbook and then did the final at the end of the year, they would do fine. But they don't tend to be the majority. They tend to be kind of the unique student, at least from our perspective at the community college. So in higher ed, we've adopted this asynchronous course as pretty much the standard. So that being said, I think there is evidence to suggest that by increasing opportunities for student interaction within the asynchronous online course, we can help to close this transactional distance and provide the necessary support for students to be successful. So that's the theory that I'm basing it upon. I want to share a little bit of some research that's been done in this area, and I think kind of help us apply it. So Community College Research Center, Teachers College, Columbia University, studied 23 entry-level online courses at 2 community colleges. And the researchers rated each of the online courses in terms of the depth of its interpersonal interaction. They also looked at other quality factors, including the clarity of learning objectives and the effectiveness of technology integration. And then they used these ratings to predict student grades. So what they found was the course level of interpersonal interaction was the single most important factor in predicting student grades. Students in low interaction courses earn nearly 1 letter grade lower than the students in the high interaction courses. So you can see in that graph, interaction was important, but the more the interaction, actually, the better the performance of the students. So to quote CCRC, establishing a meaningful instructor presence through the effective use of interactive technologies appears to be a particularly powerful strategy for enhancing student outcomes. And I think that one of the important things to understand here is that we're talking about interpersonal interaction. There are a variety of ways that students can interact in the online environment. Probably the most common ones, the most frequent ones that we discuss are student-to-student interaction, student-to-instructor interaction, and student-to-content interaction. And we're going to talk about student-to-content interaction a little bit later, but this interpersonal interaction, student-to-student or student-to-instructor, is the critical piece. And specifically, the student-to-instructor interaction, actually, as we increase that using technology, we can improve student performance. That's one study. So another study done by Kung Zhu and Eichhorn at a large public four-year institution also looked at student achievement and the level of interactivity in the online. This was a pre-calculus course. And in this course, originally it was actually a face-to-face course, kind of with a lab. So there was some online work, but they were required to come to the lab and to work in that. They decided to move that online. And when the school moved it online, and there were just under 1,000 students participating over 2 academic years in the study. So in the first year, and they were using Alex, in the first year, a little over half of the students were enrolled in the course with minimal interpersonal interaction. In other words, they were expected to work through the material. They did have weekly assignments, and then they were given quizzes and a final. In the second year, they were intentional about sending personalized email messages to the students on a weekly basis. So these were students that they were following using Alex and looking at what their strengths were and what their weaknesses were, what areas they needed help with, and they would reach out to the students. And then in addition to that, they held these weekly, albeit voluntary, synchronous sessions. The students could log in and they would go over one of the assignments or something that they were currently studying. And so what they found was that these practices intend to increase the interactivity of the course, brought about substantial benefits to students. Specifically, students in the higher interactivity conditions scored 4 percentage points higher on their course final exam than the students who did not receive the same treatment. The higher level of interpersonal interaction also helped boost student final grades up by almost half a grade. So as you can see in the first area of the graph, the fail or not pass, there were some pass, not pass. You'll see that by a third, there was a reduction in that fail or not pass. And then as you look at the grades, generally speaking, below a C, there were fewer Ds. And then as you look at above Cs, there were many more Bs and As. So we saw again that simply by adding this opportunity for interpersonal interaction into the course design, we can improve student performance. Credence Baker is a researcher from Tarleton State University. And in this study, it was actually kind of lengthy. I'm not going to get into a lot of the detail about it. There were approximately 700 students that were enrolled in online courses at a mid-sized university. 18% of the participants were enrolled for the first time online. So the study sought to examine instructor immediacy and presence in an online learning environment. And then they looked at how immediacy and presence were predictors of student effective learning, cognition, and motivation. And what they found was there was a statistically significant relationship, positive relationship between the instructor immediacy and presence. In other words, if you make yourself present as an instructor, then students feel this connection to you. They feel that they have, they recognize you as a person and you recognize them. So they create this sense of connection in the online course. And then they also found that combination of instructor immediacy and presence was statistically significant predictor of student effective learning, cognition, and motivation. So there was, students were engaged and they felt involved, and they were, I guess, just more engaged and motivated in the course. So when they looked at some of the other variables, they looked at what was going on in these online courses. And the one thing that seemed to explain this, this variance that was going on, was the use of synchronous technology, or even in the synchronous online course. So that was another bit of research that supports that whole concept of utilizing this technology. So I want to share with you a case study, I guess design-based research actually study, that Patrick Lowenthal, he's a researcher and associate professor of educational technology at Boise State University. If you've been working in online for very long, you may have read other research by Patrick. He's been a researcher for many years in looking at social engagement and looking at teaching presence and that sort of thing. So he and some of the colleagues wanted to revisit their approach to virtual office hours. Their past experience was one of very low interest and participation on the part of students. I don't think that's necessarily a lot different from face-to-face. I know that a lot of our faculty schedule their office hours and sometimes forget that actually they need to be in their office at that time, because they rarely see any students. They may not only have their office hours scheduled, but then turn around and use that time to attend a meeting or participate in a committee. So this is the similar experience that these online instructors were seeing. And what they wanted to do was and here's what is the basis for their study, quote, given the potential affordances of synchronous communication technology, we set forth to investigate how to successfully use live synchronous video-based communication, in other words, web conferencing, in predominantly asynchronous online courses. So looking at their research study, they used a design-based research, and I don't know if folks are familiar with design-based research. It differs somewhat in that it's very contextual. We take research that's been done in the past that should result in a particular outcome, and then we apply it to our course. And then we want to see how that applies to our course. Do we get the same kind of outcomes in the course? And it is also an iterative process. So as you're working through the study, you gather feedback from your students, and that feedback informs iterations through the study. So you improve it over time until you get to the place where you have the kinds of outcomes that you're looking for. So they use that, applying the theory and current research within the context of their virtual classroom. And then, excuse me. So they decided, first of all, that they were going to rebrand it. And so, as you can see from the slide, they rebranded it as Happy Hour. I guess they just wanted to call it something. Yeah, I think Happy Hour was, kind of for students, it would just say, well, this is different than office hours. There was some other, I've read some other things that talked about students not really understanding what office hours means. And so, especially if you're coming from a K-12 background and coming into college for the first time, you might think of as office hours as something where you have to go and kind of showing up like after school to talk about your assignment. So that's probably not going to be very popular for students. Also, students might not really want to let on that they don't really understand what's going on by attending the office hours. That there's some real advantages, and I think it's important to let students know that there are real advantages to being able to attend office hours, and that they get that one-on-one personalized support over the instruction. So this was one of the things they wanted to do, is they did change the name of it. They also said that attendance is optional, and they used the calendar as a reminder. So there were notifications that went out, as well as, so in their announcements, in their learning management system, excuse me. And then they also made sure that it was on a calendar and reminded students, this is coming up. They didn't hold it every week. They broke it out every few weeks across the semester, so that it became kind of an event rather than just something that was coming up every week. And then finally, and this was more of the iterative process, they decided as they went along that they wanted to add an instructional lesson to each of the sessions that they held. And this actually increased the student attendance. And student attendance was actually pretty high initially. And then as they went through the semester, it dropped off some. And that might be expected, but that was what they were learning. And as it turned out, it was pretty successful as far as the students were concerned. And so I want to share a little bit about the results. Students were surveyed as to their motivation for attending the optional sessions. And students rated highest that attending happy hour was a good use of their time. Second was followed with getting to know their instructor better. So this really is, again, kind of supporting this whole idea of instructor-student immediacy, this recognition. They value this ability to get to know their instructors better using this environment. So what Patrick and others decided was that although student attendance was relatively high and dwindled, the opportunity for students to meet with their instructor, putting a face to a name, being able to ask questions in real time, and see and hear their classmates helped the students to make important connections that could influence their persistence. I do have this research, and there is a link to this research in my slides, and I'll share that link with you toward the end of the presentation. So at this point, I want to talk a little bit about our experience at Grand Rapids Community College. We did have a dozen faculty who volunteered to participate in the pilot. I think that, but as they went along, there were some that were more active than others. I'm just going to share with you a few of the faculty that were involved in this and what they had to say. Also, not all of the work that they did was synchronous in nature. We used Zoom, as I mentioned. Zoom has the ability for you to be able to record, and it does a pretty good job of screenshots. The resulting recording can be shared in different places, like you could share it in YouTube. We have a server, a media server that we use with Blackboard, that's integrated with Blackboard. It's very easy for students to post, or excuse me, the faculty and students, I suppose, to post their recordings out there on our Relay server. So they were using that in different ways. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that they used it. Mursalada Muhammad is a professor of English at Grand Rapids Community College. She used Zoom to record short overviews of material each week and posted them to the LMS along with her announcements. And although these sessions are primarily screen share, her students get to recognize her voice and mannerisms as she goes through the material. And this is a part of this immediacy that we were talking about, this ability to recognize your instructor. Sometimes it isn't visual. Sometimes it's just being able to hear what they say. Sometimes it's their mannerisms and their voice. And so I think I can share with you a short video. I'm not sure if I can get the audio, so I'm going to give it a shot, and we'll see how that goes.
Do that. Continue exploring Blackboard because I've made some changes, and I want to make sure that you review the draft review information, because for project 1, you have to have a draft review session with a GRCC tutor or one or both of the personal correspondence letters you have to write. Don't know what I'm talking about? Let's go over to the projects. So project 1, gonna click and go into, you had the bibliography assignment, and then you had the personal correspondence assignment.
So I just wanted you to see that. I'm trying to get back to my slides. And what Mercelada was doing, hopefully you were able to hear some of that, you know, her voice is, you know, her voice and her manner are there. And in addition to this work that she was using with these short tutorials that she was holding each week, she does use it for office hours as well. So students can connect with her and they can have personal, real-time interaction with her as well. So that's one faculty member in the example of how she used it. Another faculty is Rachel Ludwig-Diener, also with the English department. She's assistant professor of English at GRCC. She used both synchronous and asynchronous tools. She didn't use Zoom, she used Google Meet, and she used Flipgrid. She does post a picture or a photo of herself, and then she used voice over IP to interact in real time with her students. So, I mean, as similarly to how some of us are using this today. We have people who have their image, you see my image. And I'm doing that intentionally because I want you to see and think about that immediacy and think about how it is that you would recognize me. I mean, would you recognize me if you saw me in the grocery store? That's really kind of what we're after. We're really after the students being able to have some type of connection that would be similar to the connection that they make in the regular classroom. And I mentioned that she used Flipgrid as well. With her weekly assignment using Flipgrid, students are able to make short recordings of themselves and interact with one another, much like in a discussion forum that uses video and audio. And so the result is not only do the students recognize their instructor, but they also recognize one another. And this increases student social presence. Gary Brand is a business law professor here at GRCC. He uses Zoom for individual student conferencing as well as for occasional live sessions. Gary and I work together. And Gary has talked about even moving his course into kind of a blended format where he would have these live sessions scheduled every week. So in this recording, he really pretty much talks about how to use the tool. I won't go into those details unless that's something that you're interested in me coming back to, but otherwise I'll just continue on with what some of the students had to say about Zoom. Actually, this slide's out of order, but I'm going to talk about it. No, I'm not. I'm going to come back to it. Sorry. I want to talk first about what the faculty had to say about using Zoom. Now, I mentioned that we had a dozen faculty that volunteered to participate. We had a smaller number that actually did anything substantive. And then when I asked them to actually respond to a survey, I only had 4 responses from faculty. So not a big number, but I think you can get a sense of what they had to say. And this was probably a pretty good representation of what faculty were doing with Zoom. So how did you use Zoom in your online class? We had, of the 4, 3 said they used it in real-time instructional sessions. 3 of them said recording and posting instructional content. And then the 3rd was virtual office hours. I also asked whether they used it for posting announcements, and none of them used it for that purpose. Although you can use Zoom for that purpose. Our LMS really is probably a better way to post announcements. We found over the years that our students are really using, we use Blackboard, and they're using that Blackboard, the student app on their phone. And if you encourage students to use that app early in the semester, that it's a pretty good communication tool, because when you post something, they receive an announcement for that, a notification. And so it's not like they have to log into the LMS to find it. That's another way for you to interact with students and provide them with in real time or just in time information. So I asked what features they used with Zoom, and they could check all that applied again. And the recording and screen sharing features were used by all 4 respondents. So those would have been the things that I would have expected, because they're going to make short tutorials and share those things, or they may have a live session and record that session for students that were not able to attend it. Again, most of these were voluntary. I don't know that we had any faculty that said that it was required for students to log into these sessions. So it was important that they were able to record them and to share them. They did use host and participant video. This is something that that I think it's good for faculty or for students to be able to see their faculty, put a name, not just put a name to a face, but also learn their mannerisms, their voice and inflection, all of that kind of thing. That improves that instructor to student immediate. It also mentioned that they use the waiting room. There were just about half of them using that. The waiting room is a nice feature if you use Zoom for office hours. Because if you're with a student and you're talking about that student's work, the waiting room is something where you'll be alerted that there is another student waiting to meet with you, and you can message that student. And then when you're done with your session with your current student, you can let the other student into the Zoom session. So it is kind of a nice feature. We also use this a great deal with our tutoring area. It's a huge draw for tutoring. We've begun to use it with advising, and we're using it with admissions as well. Oh yeah, Blackboard integration of Zoom. Some of our faculty found that they didn't know that there were some big advantages, and they ended up just posting a link to their Zoom room. But obviously Zoom can be integrated with Blackboard. So, and there are some advantages to doing that. Another question, having taught this course previously without Zoom, how did adding the synchronous component impact student performance? And 3 out of 4 said that it thought that it had improved student performance. I didn't go back and actually do any analysis of before and after for those instructors in those courses, although I think that data might still be available. So it might be possible for me to go back and actually look at whether indeed it wasn't just a perception, but there was indeed any improvement in student performance. And then we had one instructor who said that they didn't believe that it had any impact, and no one said that it was detrimental. How did adding a synchronous component impact student engagement? Everyone believed that it increased student engagement. And I think that that is the big thing that we're looking for to happen here. Excuse me. Student satisfaction. This is another faculty perception of student satisfaction. And did adding this synchronous component impact? 50% said they thought that it neither increased it or decreased student satisfaction. One thought that it was more so, and then one wasn't sure whether it did anything in that area. But students have a little bit to say about that, and I'll share what they have to say in just a moment. So let me go back up to that other slide. And we'll talk about student feedback on using Zoom. So for those that use Zoom in the winter semester 2019, we asked students to complete a survey. 38 students responded to the questionnaire, and For the most part, students found it easy to use and helpful in their learning. The most valued area here was that Zoom helped them communicate with their instructor. So this is what I think speaks to that whole immediacy. We talked a little bit about perceptions of learner engagement and immediacy, and I think students felt that it did help them to communicate with their instructor. It is interesting to me though, because in an online course and also in a blended course, there are many opportunities to communicate with your instructor, but I think they saw this because it was a real-time communication that it improved that experience. So I thought that was interesting. We asked the students what they most liked about Zoom, and the number one answer, again, was interaction with my professor. That was the highest. The ability to ask questions, second. And then again, this whole business of classroom feel. I thought that was interesting too, because that classroom feel supports a sense of the here and now. Well, our goal when we were looking at Moore's transactional distance theory was to kind of bring that sense of here and now, the classroom feel, into the asynchronous environment. And so to me, this kind of speaks to that. I think that it talks about how we're able to make that happen. What did you not like, or what did you like least about Zoom? You know, I think that it was positive that students, the majority of students actually took the time to say nothing, that they liked nothing about using Zoom, or like least about using Zoom. And then the one thing that was a concern for some students, and they made this in the comments, they didn't align with their schedule. Now, keeping in mind that this was a voluntary session, they weren't required to attend this session, but they felt like they missed out on something if they weren't able to attend the session. So these instructors did record sessions and did post those sessions. And I've had that same experience myself. I took a grad class in business a number of years ago, and I had an instructor that met with us synchronously, virtually, and then would record those sessions. And there were some times that I couldn't attend that session, but it was good that I had the recording, but it really wasn't quite the same as being able to be there live. Even though I really didn't ask a lot of questions, it was just kind of being there with other students, being able to ask those questions in real time. So it's just like that, again, that classroom feel was important. There were some students that reported some technical issues, slowness of sound, unfamiliarity with the app. And I would say that this particular tool, I think, is really good at governing as far as what your bandwidth is and your connection speed. But sometimes you may need to turn off the video. Sometimes that helps to turn off the video, and then that will help to speed things along. So this is a link. I know it looks kind of long. I do have a DGO account, and it's under IT Bill. And if you look under e-learning in that, so I think the other shorter URL is itbill.dgo.com. And then you would take me to my library or the /user./itbill. And then there is an e-learning link there. And if you click on that, you'll get the list. And then I reference Michael Moore's theory of transactional distance here. And here's some ways that you can reach me. And I don't know if you have any questions. I know I kind of talked pretty fast through that. And I hope you value any time you have left over. But I'm happy to answer any questions or go back over anything that we already discussed.
We'll give folks a chance. Some of them tend to be a little shy.
You bet.
I noticed that you did your research using a lot of information, really good information, kind of correlates with my research I did looking at student data logs and the importance of that instructor presence that you had mentioned in your session. Have you or your university looked at the student data logs to see if those sessions that they were talking about that were helpful for them and how they liked it, to see any correlation between what you researched in the surveys and what the actual students did from the student data logs. That sounds like that'd be a great, another research out there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be good. And one of the things that we were also piloting at the same time was the use of TechSmith Relay, which also integrates with Blackboard. And one of the nice things about Relay is there are additional data available to us with things like how long a student spent on a video, whether they went over it again, how many times they may have viewed the video. So those kinds of things I think might also be useful. We did not gather that data, but even as I'm going through this today for the second time, I'm thinking that we probably have good data that we can go back over and kind of see the correlation between what they tell us and whether in fact that has impacted student engagement. I think we can probably measure engagement if we look at how much time and how often students engage with the content. And then we could also look at performance. So yeah, I appreciate that idea and suggestion. Okay, well.
Any more questions, comments?
Someone had posted about, could you put the Digo link up in the chat area?
Oh, sure, I can do that. That's a good idea. There you go.
Well, I feel closure coming on if nobody else jumps in then. Oh, and Alyssa would like to know how they need to copy your slides.
You bet. Let me go here and let's see. Let me just get out of my slides. And let me share it. Let me check who, I have to change this so that it goes to public. Okay, should work. It should work for you now.
Yeah, thank you. Talk about a man being organized and knowing what to do. It's great.
Well, thank you. It was fun.
Okay, so if nothing else then, we'll bring this to a close. Bill, thank you so much for sharing with us. It was really helpful and informative.
You bet. Welcome.
And thank you all. Hopefully we'll see you at the top of the hour in the last session of the day.